All right, so we'll call today's July BAC meeting to order. Start off with the minutes. Bill Lesage back.
Peter Rachael back.
Rita Russell, City Council.
Jenny Nolan, Budget Manager.
Kevin Ingles, Director of Finance.
Tyson Thornburg, Budget and Financial Analyst.
Sean Lewis, City Manager's Office.
Victor Rochelle, Director of Public Works.
Vance Fender, Police Department.
Most Deputy Director of Public Works.
James Moran back.
Hey, Steve Ward with Council.
Suzanne Dirksen, Budget Advisory Committee.
All right, and Tim on the phone, online.
Tim Dye, Deputy City Manager.
All right. I know for our back members, Jay's not going to be able to make it. He was traveling back today. Unexpected travel for work. Hopefully Devon comes here soon. All right. So approval, do I have a motion to approve the May meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We will move forward.
Here comes Nevan, right?
I got him. We'll just build up the anticipation here
That's
for our member vote.
Not last. Hi, Nevan. Good to see you.
All right. So great timing. You're our first order of business tonight.
No pressure.
So we'd like to have a motion to vote Nevan in from an alternate member to a regular member, effective next month.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You opposed? All right. So starting next month, you're an officially voting regular member.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And then, okay, we have a few more updates, but we'll wait till members' choice for that. So to get started on the next item of business, so we're going to talk through the sales and use tax for today. I know we did our review, 2 months ago about, and then today was kind of the final review of that and the audited version, I believe, so. So I think we can get started whenever you're ready, Victor.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So I'm Victor Rochelle, Director of Public Works. I will be covering the sales use tax with respect to roadway maintenance. Also have Tim Hoos, Deputy Director of Public Works, here with me today in case there are questions that he has information on that I'm unable to answer. So next slide, please. So just the general agenda there. So I'll cover Public Works part, and then we've got Vance here with PD to cover the police departments.
I'll go through the first couple of slides that kind of give you some background about how we got here. So November 22, the citizens approved a 0.3% increase on local sales tax. There's two different ballot issues. 2B was 0.2% for street repairs and maintenance. That is administered by Victor and his crew in the Public Works Department. 2C was for alternative policing, and that is handled by Vance's and Chief Watson's in the police department. Also part of that measure was to have a citizen committee review the spending each year. And in December of that same year in 2022, City Council designated that this group would be that committee that reviewed the spending. Here's the ballot language, and for the first year, the dollar amounts were set. Going forward, they will be the actual percentages of actual collections for the year, so it will vary as we go through the years. And those are the results of the votes there as well. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Director Rochelle.
Thank you, Kevin. So dedicated sales tax, approximately 0.2%, resulted in a little over 1.9 million additional revenue for expenditure on roadway maintenance. And so as part of the roadway maintenance program in 2023, we covered pavement zone 5, 3, and 2 On there, you'll see the streets that we covered, including the last one, which was Bellevue from Hamden, the 285 drive lanes only in a couple spots, as well as, that's South Broadway from Bellevue up to Hamden. We did skip the business district there. And next, we do have a map that highlights these roadways. These were roadways that were specifically added given the influx of the sales tax, that 1.9 million that we talked about. These would most likely have not been on the plan if those additional funds were not available to stretch our dollars and get on there. They would have been pushed probably another year, depending on budget and where they fall in the cycle. So the total cost for all of the streets last year was a little over 4.8 million. And again, the total sales tax revenue that we applied was 1.9 million. So those sales tax dollars were used first. In addition, we also had some ARPA dollars that we needed to make sure were expended per the ARPA timeframe. So those two pots, if you will, were expended first. And then we had our regular allocation for roadway maintenance that were added on top to come up to that total $4.865 million expenditure on roadway maintenance within the city. With, again, the highlighted red roads on the previous slide being added. And I apologize, the text at the bottom there is maybe a little tough to see on the screen. But it highlights the pavement zones and the roadways and where those dollars were spent, pointing to the red being the 1.9. Next slide. So going a little bit of a deep dive in there for South Broadway, Dartmouth to Floyd, and then Bellevue down to 285. Again, if you've driven that, you'll notice it was the drive lanes. And again, we were trying to balance the budget, making sure that we expended all the funds. If we had done full curb to curb in the entire stretch, we would have certainly gone over budget. So next slide. Just an example of the milling. So what we do is we go through, we mill off that top course, we maintain the bottom section of pavement, including the subgrade underneath, and then put a new, what's called a top mat on top of there, which is a wear course and meant to be replaced every, depending on wear and usage, hopefully every 5+ years, and hopefully pushing closer to 10. Again, that depends on the average daily traffic, the ADT, percent trucks. Heavier vehicles obviously are a lot tougher on our roadways. And so your mileage may vary depending on those various criteria. Next slide. So for the 2023 mill and overlay, it also included Tejon north of Dartmouth. A couple other just highlights there, Harvard, Bates, all in red on the screen. Tejon mill and overlay, again, very similar. You can see the far left picture, the condition. We got a lot of cracking, alligatoring there. So we milled that off, put down what's called a tack coat to get the 2 layers to bond and then do a resurface. And you can see on the right-hand side, a roller rolling in and compacting that top surface, wear surface there on Tejon. And that's kind of the short and sweet of it. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has, if you'd like to go back and dive into any details.
How much ARPA funding went toward this work?
So for last year, ARPA funding, we had $2 million.
So about the same.
Pretty close, just a hair over.
Okay.
In 2023. So, and that money's been fully expended. So.
Questions? Okay.
I will add just real quick, the contract for the 2024 pavement was just approved recently by council. We're out doing concrete work now, and we're going to begin slurry seal and mill and inlay in short order. And there is heavy coordination right now with the utilities department. The utility department is beginning their lead service removal. And so we're trying to make sure we're not tripping over each other. We don't want to resurface a road and then have them come right behind us and replace lead service lines. So trying to be aware of that, make sure we're being good stewards and making these dollars go as far as they are, but also getting the best bang for our buck and replacing our worst conditioned roads in the network.
So just a point of clarification. So we had almost $2 million from the sales and use tax,
Yep.
$2 million from ARPA.
Correct.
And the total amount spent was
4.8 and change.
4.8, and ARPA is not going to be continuing.
Correct. ARPA was a one-time use
So essentially, we're gonna see a big drop off then and perhaps backfilled to some degree by the sales and use tax?
To a certain extent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the ARPA was a one-time expenditure, so.
Yeah.
One of the things that I talked to Public Works about was the need to not assume that the tax is just going to supplant what the general fund or through the CIP annual process, was spending in the past, but it's supposed to be additive. So we want to keep spending what we're spending and spend the 2 million to really get us caught up until we can kind of catch up. So that's one reason you see our contracts this year are more than what the sales tax is bringing in, right?
Right, because we do have a separate line item for roadway maintenance, so that 1.9 is added to that. Yes, sir.
Obviously, roadway maintenance is a continuous item. Where's the breakover point and where we are caught up, so to speak?
Great question. So we actually are engaged right now with a new roadway condition pavement assessment firm, and they're out assessing our roadways. So we have data from several years ago that's in the system, and the roadways degrade over time a certain number of points, and we're trying to get our score back up to probably a 70 or better on the pavement condition index overall.
We're in the high 50s, if I remember last time. That might be a couple years ago.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
we've got a ways to go. Last year made a huge dent, and so the current survey will include the roadways we did, roadways we have to go, and kind of tell us where we're at from a score condition. And then we'll put that all into our asset management database, and then continue to track that.
We'll be able to see that, I'm sure.
Did we spend last year what we normally spend in addition to those two things or not as much?
I would say in a comparison to previous years, we exceeded expenditures, but we also had almost more than double the money because we had the 2 million ARPA and we had the close to 2 million sales tax. So normally, and I'd have to pull the number, but it looks like we're generally somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range, and that's it. And so last year we had close to, let's see, a little over closer to 6 million total. So we came close to spending all of that. That also includes slurry seal and some of our concrete replacement that we have to do as part of that prep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And for all of this is just across the board, and we've probably talked about this, but how do we project the next year's, like it was 1.9, $2 million, is that what you take into consideration for the next year? Or, I mean, I'm sure you all have your calculations. And
For the sales tax?
Sales tax, yeah.
I'll maybe look to finance there a little bit. From the roads perspective, we use the pavement condition index, and we have a plan per zone in treatment. Not to say, again, we can't go outside of that plan, but we're treating our worst roads and trying to bring those up as quickly as possible. But
Yes, so as we go through the budget process, we'll be honing in on what our overall sales tax number will be. So then, and since this is the second year, we can apply that percentage to it. It's not a fixed amount, it'll be a percentage of whatever our total collections are. So that's what we'll use to put in.
Okay, so it's kind of a yearly projection kind of. Okay, thanks.
so everybody buy stuff in Englewood. Help us pave the roads.
Need shirts made, there you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to police.
All right, I have Sam Watson on the line, and he's actually on the phone because he can't get into Teams. So if there's anything I need to defer to Chief Watson, I can do that, old school with the phone. So so I'll go through ours real quick. As you see, we added everything up on this initial slide that tells you exactly where we take those portions of our staff time that are related to homelessness, addiction, and mental health issues, which is obviously quite broad. And we'll talk about each of those on each slide as we go through. So All Health, we have a contract with the All Health Network for our co-responder program. That is 100%. They work with folks with that are experiencing mental illness, homelessness, or any addiction issues. Our contract this year was for $262,650. And so that amount of money goes directly to All Health for that contract. That is not for the MRU. It is just for the co-responders, because all health funds the MRU on their own. Next is our zone policing program, which is 2 officers who work specific areas of the city in the Polaris there. And they work in areas that are experiencing high calls for service and chronic problems. Really, they focus 100% of their time to employees that work on mental health, addiction, and homelessness. They carry resources, they utilize the MRU, they contact people literally during their entire shift and deal with addiction, drug issues. And right now they're assigned to the city center area between Santa Fe, Broadway, and Dartmouth, and 285. So that's specifically their patrol area right now, and that's what they do 100% of the time. Our impact team is 5 officers, a sergeant and 4 officers. They're assigned to special operations. They are a community policing model that is deployed by our crime analyst. What they do is they work with our co-responders, they work with the MRU, and they work with other agencies. And a portion of their calls for service are related to mental health, addiction, and homelessness, because they do focus their efforts proactively throughout the city. So that's 4 FTEs at 25% of their salaries, which adds up to $141,360. Then we have the lieutenant's position that oversees many of those programs. That lieutenant oversees the all health liaison, oversees our police case manager, the zone officers, the SRO, and the PDO program. And so a portion of that patrol lieutenant's day is spent dealing with those issues at 25% of their day at $41,507. Our department resource sergeant is overseen by that lieutenant. They are directly responsible for the zone officers, PDOs, the SRO, and the officers that are assigned to the co-responder, which we'll get to here in a moment. We've estimated that 25% of Sergeant Totus's time is spent on those issues at $38,743. We added a dispatch position last year, specifically because we do 911 mental health call diversion from dispatch, and we are also the dispatching entity for the mobile response unit throughout Englewood and Littleton. So our calls for service increased, and their job functions increased, and so but that workload is spread out to all the dispatchers. But there's 1 FTE that we are counting towards this at $122,487. Our PDO positions, our police desk officer positions, they are part of our civilian professional group. They write phone reports, meet people in the lobby, and assist officers with their reports and paperwork. We estimated 33% of each of our 3 PDOs is spent in mental health, addiction, and issues of homelessness, specifically with records keeping and reports and assisting the officers. In 23, our FTE count in this area was increased from 1 to 3 in order to accommodate the shift in policing. So we're at 33% at 3 FTEs there. Next is our SRO, Officer Shaw Gifford. About 10% of Officer Gifford's time at the schools is spent with homelessness, mental illness, and addiction, specifically with the student population and assisting with resources in homelessness, because we do have students that are experiencing homelessness, and then addiction, drug use, and specifically crisis intervention. That number could actually be higher. I told you we get to this part. Our co-responders, we have 2 co-responders that we're responsible for 40 hours a week. Those co-responders ride with a police officer 40 hours a week. So they ride with an officer the entire shift. So when that program is fully staffed, they're assigned to that on-duty officer. That on-duty officer, we've estimated about 75% of their time on patrol during that shift is spent doing co-responder mental health, addiction responsibilities. They respond to specific calls for service with the co-responders so we can utilize the co-responders' expertise on those calls. So when a co-responder is present, those patrol assignments aren't increased. So there's no increase in numbers on the officers on the street, but that shift for that patrol officer is specific to those three things. So we estimated that at 2 FTEs for those co-responders, our officers spend about 75% of their time, which adds up to that 219,878 number. And then a patrol officer that's assigned to our police resource case manager, which is Emily Van Hake. It's different than that of a co-responder. Emily specifically tracks and contacts individuals that are experiencing homelessness, addiction, and mental health that are chronic, and she provides case management. So we have an officer that Emily goes out with on a daily basis and tries to contact these folks specifically by name, that she knows these folks, to try to get them resources. And so we estimated that 1 FTE cost at 25% of their day at that 32,000 number. Next is code enforcement and park rangers. They do dedicate a portion of their time dealing with mental health, addiction, and homelessness, specifically recreational vehicles, people that are living in their vehicles, the urban campers, and we have to deal with sometimes their property and their pets when we're focusing our efforts on those folks. We estimated that those 2 FTEs, the code enforcement officer and a park ranger, spends about 25% of their time dealing with those issues, which could actually also be a little higher at 63,544. And that is the police department's use of our 0.1% on those three things. Questions?
Can I jump in? I was giggling at the last slide because I saw the ducks.
The ducks, I know.
Did they forget to pull their weeds?
I did not, I try to get other people to pick the pictures because I'm horrible at that, so.
I like the ducks. So when I reviewed this, I struggled with the way the information was presented. So I have no doubt that you guys are spending money responsibly. But the language that keeps popping up with the sales tax increase is dedicated. So I think the funds are certainly dedicated to all health zone impact, but when I see portions of FTEs that already existed, that doesn't tell me that the money is dedicated to those services. So in other words, like if the additional sales tax revenue were to go away tomorrow, would all those people get demoted? You know, would they go from a full FTE to a 0.6 or a 0.75? No, like obviously no. So that tells me that the sales tax revenue is not, like you were mentioning with respect to public works, it's not additive. So it's kind of touching on all the ways in which any police department employee is touching on mental health, addiction, substance abuse. So I guess I was looking for, when I was reviewing it, more delineation between what was being done in the past and how this additional funding is truly supporting additional services for homelessness, addiction, mental health services.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that what we're doing right now is we're using this money so that money's dedicated to those things for those officers. So let's say the lieutenant's position, for example, that lieutenant oversees those programs that do deal with people experiencing homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. That money can then be used in other places in the police department for additional staffing, equipment, things of that nature, because the sales tax increase has allowed us to pay for portions of those officers' salaries, positions that touch those three things. I hope that explains it.
I think I understand it.
Because we're able to then use that money in a different place and increase the staffing and increase some of the equipment needs due to that. Those officers would still be dealing with homelessness, addiction, and mental illness just as much as they are now, with or without the funding. I know
Can we use the sales and use tax to hire more officers by committing officers specifically to only this? I mean, I see that some people are specifically funded by the sales and use tax already in their roles.
That would be a difficult proposition to hire additional officers that are just going to deal with those three things, because a lot of what, like the sworn officers are doing, that work intermingles with their daily patrol work. And so that's where it gets, I think that gray portion comes in, is because of those three things. It does intermingle with their jobs on a daily basis. And so because of that, we're able to provide a portion of that money. So we could increase our staffing from 78 to 84.
Makes sense. And I understand that certainly the work is very situational, and there's a lot of crossover in any situation, I'd imagine.
There is, and I can understand from your point that yes, all health, it's very much, hey, here it is. You have zone police officers that are doing that every day, here it is. But the rest of it's very, I'm not gonna say gray, it's situational. It's because that work is intertwined in their work daily.
And oftentimes you don't know that it's a mental health.
Until you get there.
Issue until you get there. And, but I think I'll use the dispatcher as an example. Like, it is a very clear additional FTE that is supported.
Even though that is spread across 14
Yes.
different dispatchers, we had to add
Yeah, it's
that
an
in
additional
there
line item.
because there's more work for them to do.
I think it was records where you have 3 people, 3
Sure.
warm bodies, 33% each. Like, that might be another example where the full FTE.
And we literally, yeah, and we could, when we looked at this, we actually could have added more things or people or programs to this. And there are alternate places where we could actually look as well and say, well, this does this function as well. We do have another FTE that dedicates X percentage of their time to dealing with one of these 3 issues, all 3 issues, 2 of the issues. And we could look in an alternate place if this body wasn't satisfied with a certain portion of that.
Yeah.
We could definitely look at other places within the department where we could pull that from.
Yeah.
And show that that is a portion of what they do. Because it's very rare you're gonna have 100% of their time contributed to that.
No, as an individual, I don't mind sharing. I voted in favor of it. I very much trust the work that you're doing and the way that the way the funds are being spent. I think the challenge is if we were to take this to the voters, they would say, you're just doing the same work you were doing already. And I just question the way it's being presented and reported.
Sure.
Yeah, I hear you.
Could I ask a couple points of clarification?
Of course.
Please. So looking at, the focus is alternatives to policing, so I'm immediately kind of drawn to the co-responders and the case manager.
Sure.
And in full disclosure, I work in human services, so it's kind of where I live every day. Were those positions or those people in place prior to the sales tax initiative?
Police resource case manager was not.
Okay.
That was an additional FTE. We did fund the co-responders through our existing budget, which again, now that we don't have to pay that, allowed us to hire additional sworn officers.
Okay. And then with the case manager, I know you mentioned the co-responders are through a contractual relationship with another organization.
Correct.
Is that also the case with the case manager?
No, we brought the police resource case manager in-house last year, which has been fantastic for us. Yeah, today, as a matter of fact, she's did a bunch of research and sent out information to all the officers on cooling centers throughout Englewood for people that needed cooling centers and things of that nature. She's very, very active with many, many different community agencies, representing the police department very well.
I think it's just more of a general maybe comment, maybe question, but as this sort of topic and area becomes a bigger issue, and I guess we can pick on any part of it, but homelessness, for instance, to pick one, is how are we continuing to think about and sort of advance our medical assistance with medical professionals? And maybe some of that falls within or outside of the budget, but how are we comparing to other cities? And are there other resources that may be available to us on the medical professional side that may help us
I'm not
meet our
certain.
goals?
I'm not certain on the medical side. I think, if you look at other cities, we do have, and have had one of the most robust co-responder programs in the metro area since the inception of our program. I think with us also bringing in that police resource case manager in-house, that was very cutting edge, for lack of better words. Most of the agencies don't have that in-house. If they have it, it's contractual. On the medical side, I don't know that we could do anything different in terms of that. I don't know if I understood your question 100%.
Well, I just, I watch LA, Los Angeles, because they do some very interesting things. And as this continuing social issue and related issues continue, it seems that the medical side of our addressing these issues is becoming more penultimate in terms of helping those in need.
I think that we're not doing anything different than any other metro agency I'm aware of as far as integrating any medical folks into our actual police department. Denver does have their STAR unit that is funded by the city and county of Denver that does have a medical professional on their van. MRU provides that service through All Health without our funding, with an RN and a clinical person on the van itself. So that RN does provide low level, low acuity medical care through the MRU, but that's not through the police department.
Okay, thanks for that.
One other comment that I've raised is obviously this year with it being the first year that we're really putting a lot of this into place, there certainly wasn't an expectation for this. But it might be helpful just from the point of view of communicating to the public when we're looking at these spreadsheets with line items for certain percentages of FTEs, to include some of the information maybe in a separate column from this presentation about the types of things that these different personnel are doing related to this.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. That makes sense.
I had the same comment, so I echo that, because I think this is where I share, I think, similar thoughts, and everyone, I agree with it. I think it's a little hard just because it is new and kind of deep into the weeds to understand it from the kind of the citizen perspective. But I think just even the simple PowerPoint that you both shared, that you and Director Rachael both shared was helpful. I know it's a bit more straightforward on the public works side, I think, than on the police
Very
side.
much so.
From this perspective, at least. But it's almost like this would have been helpful to have before we dug into the spreadsheet, because I think we could have had more conversation a bit before we looked, we dug into that spreadsheet. But I think it was a timing thing, if I remember. But I don't know, maybe something we can talk about when we plan out next year's meetings. Because this did make sense, and then just knowing that we could ask follow-up questions, I think, directly to you.
Sure. And we'll take that into consideration for next year's too, and see if we can clean up some of that language and put in there specific job responsibilities and things of that nature. I mean, I think because it's so situational, you look at the, policing in terms of homelessness, addiction, and mental health services, well, that requires police intervention. And whether that police intervention is as a level of enforcement, whether that police intervention is at a level of offering resources, literally transporting people to the hospital, which we do regularly for these things, not including our EMS system. All of those things are some community caretaking types of activities that we do on a daily basis, which makes it difficult sometimes to get those percentages.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would offer is that we can do that this year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If this is not, I agree with the somewhat vague and ambiguous percentages. I'd like to see how they were calculated. And if the board wants that, we can bring that back to you, in a future meeting. Because I think it's important to get it right the first year.
Yeah, because that makes
For
next
y'all
year.
to be satisfied.
It's a pilot.
I think I have a question that's sort of related to that, if I may. The annual comprehensive financial report was presented to council last week on the 17th. When I look at that on page 83, the categories and numbers that are presented in the audited annual comprehensive financial report are different from the numbers that are in this presentation. The total spending authorized is the same, but the categories and numbers they actually are different. And my question is, how is this committee supposed to evaluate the spending and inform the public if the numbers presented to the public in the annual comprehensive financial report are different than the categories and numbers presented to the committee? If you can go back to the slide, I can. Yeah, okay. So the first category here is zone policing, 262,990. The first category on this one is co-responder contract, 262,650. The second one is zone policing, but that shows 257,731. The numbers are actually different for the same item in the audited report versus what's being presented to the committee here.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. Some of that is a timing issue. We have to have audited information to our auditors in April. This process was still being refined during that time. So we focused more on the total spending for each piece of the ballot measure. And it did, yeah, some of these did get tweaked a little bit after that fact. So maybe we can try, I don't know, I won't speak for the public, maybe we can narrow that down a little bit earlier so that we can have them tie together. I totally understand and agree that they should. Just being the first year, that's another thing. Information we need to take back and work on.
Yeah, I mean, we can attribute that to first year jitters. I'm okay with that. There's only 7 categories on the annual comprehensive financial report. We have far more here.
Yeah.
Police desk officer isn't even mentioned in the ACFR, so. I just wanted to play that out for the committee as they're doing their analysis.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to point out that I think there's already a place, to Nevan's point about some additional detail that doesn't require us to toggle between a PowerPoint, and that's just on that sheet that we were given. There is a column already for described services provided. And in some cases, there is quite a bit of detail, like about the All Health Network co-responders. But in other cases, it's just a very short note of, 1 FTE at 10% or something. So I think maybe a little bit more of a budget narrative built into that would be helpful, at least in my mind. I don't know how other committee members feel.
No, I agree.
I think what I was trying to get at is I'd love to see like a column for percentage of FTE, a column for description of duties. That way that we have that for each individual one. And also I think that might help. I know minor critique, but I think like even though some differences in how the percentages of FTEs were described from row to row or item to item were a little odd to read through.
Can I bring up something? It makes me uncomfortable to do this, but the way this was written to begin with, we used it to backfill. We already had co-responders, we already had all of that in place, and now what we're doing is just, even from the things you shared, is adding new things. Is there a way to unwind this? Can we go back to things that only are for alternative policing and then free up those areas of the budget for you to use other things, but then only use the sales tax money on things that are actually alternative policing?
I think we believe that what those officers are doing is some parts of alternative policing. I think that's a sticky point if I'm reading that right.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is that what they're showing here is an alternative policing, and there's been kind of this ongoing fundamental disagreement.
Of what that is.
Well, no, and I'm not saying that's a disagreement. What I'm saying is we were doing alternative policing before we ever came forward with this desire to charge sales tax and then fund it. But in order to protect the board also, I think that we need to figure out how to separate alternative policing and make sure that funding is spent on actual policing, and then we're only using the sales tax for alternative policing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at before, because it says right there on the screen, dedicated. Perhaps one solution is, I'll pick on the department resource sergeant, because I think the slide indicated 25% of that position went
Sure.
to alternative policing. Maybe we can say how the funding that is, that would otherwise, what am I trying to say? That, exactly what you're trying to say, instead of saying, all right, it's protecting 25% of his time, maybe indicate how that budgetary savings is being spent elsewhere in the department in traditional policing methods. And then one other point, like even before this one on the ballot, we've been talking about where does traditional policing end and where does alternate policing begin? I know.
And that's like the city manager said, that's kind of almost a fundamental issue we've been having, because we firmly believe that yes, a police officer with a gun and a badge can do alternative policing. And alternative policing doesn't mean not interacting with the public as a sworn police officer. It can mean a variety of different things that's just not a traditional, grabbing the truant by the ear and taking them back to school, right? I went back a few years. But I'm not even that old. But it's so there are differences in the way that 21st century policing is that is not traditional policing.
Mhm. And like we said earlier, sometimes you just don't know
And
if it becomes
sometimes you get
alternative policing
dispatched
until
to
you're on scene.
to a menacing with a knife at Oxford and Broadway, I'm just using it as an example. And when the 7 officers get there, it's an individual in a mental health crisis that is high on drugs, and we need to de-escalate the situation to where we are not using traditional policing methods of using force on them. That is alternative policing, in my opinion, is that we are using those de-escalation techniques to save somebody's life instead of using what you might consider traditional use of force. But those 6 officers are now tied up on that alternative policing. So it's kind of, it's not black and white by any stretch.
I feel like one way that some of this could be communicated, or if people feel that there is this need to create some sort of differentiation or at least a justification. I think maybe some of this could be communicated by just statistics or metrics around the amount of additional time that has been spent in those 3 major topic areas, and how that's changing over time, as well as maybe any additional time that certain types of alternative policing processes might take compared to prior processes. Those could be ways that without having to say, okay, this part of your day is the only time of day that you do alternative policing. Which just creates a huge amount of bureaucracy.
Right.
I think maybe if we were to track or consider some of those metrics, it might be easier for us to communicate. That's how we got at this number of 25%.
There are some ways we could pull some statistics based on sometimes, if we're interacting with the unhoused, if we are on a mental health call. But frankly, sometimes the mental health calls we do go on don't get listed as a mental health call because we deal with so many people that are in mental health crisis. It doesn't rise to that, emergency mental health commitment. Addiction, again, could also be, the officer that goes to a call on a person that's, experiencing behavioral issues in the street, and then when contacting this individual finds out that they're holding, a felony weight of fentanyl, and now that person we intervened in that, we're also arresting that person for the felony weight of fentanyl, but at the same time, we have to transport them to the hospital because of their intoxication, and then they're released pending charges because we can't take them from the hospital to the jail, but that's alternative policing. Otherwise, we just take them to the jail and let the jail deal with them. But taking them to the hospital gives them a better chance of getting the resources that they need, either on the mental health or the addiction side.
I think
I think I just poured mud into
No, I
the
got
water.
it. No, I think, for me, I can see now that the result of this half, 3/4, 1/4 FTE is very likely a result of my personal objections to men with badges and guns walking around and calling themselves alternative policing. But I think that may have an unintended consequence of having confused the committee. So I get 100% what you're saying, and it makes perfect sense to me from a resource allocation standpoint. Sometimes they are going to be out on patrol. Sometimes they are going to be doing things that aren't alternative policing, but the rest of the time, they're there taking care of the things that we voted to let them take care of.
Correct.
I have a question for you then.
Yes.
Do you consider zone alternate policing? No, since I'm not challenging you, I just, do you consider impact?
I don't know that I should answer that question before the committee issues its findings.
Okay. Because personally, I don't want any professional to have to deal with these alternate policing methods without wearing the proper equipment.
There is an element of safety involved.
Yes.
You're correct.
Oh, 24/7?
Yes. Which is why our co-responders ride with the police officers who do have badges and guns. So they're protected.
Oh, but they're also still a risk.
Yeah, oh,
to
very
some
much so,
things.
very much so, which is why they wear bullet resistant vests and that kind of stuff too.
Boy, it's tough work.
So as an outcome of today's meeting, and Member Ward was just making me think of this, are we, is there an additional findings, or is there additional expectation coming out of today's meeting from the board? I know we provided feedback and review, and I think it was, kind of a pass-fail type of scenario with the spreadsheet back in April. Is there anything additional that folks are looking for today? And they saying that as, hey, there might be things we want to look into doing next year, but I wanted to make sure, because I took it that there wasn't anything else we needed to provide, that this was kind of just a recap of everything.
I would say it's a recap, but it's also an opportunity for you if you have some strong feelings or
Okay.
comments regarding the process.
Okay.
We can share that in the document and, apply it to next year's report and analysis.
Or like the city manager said, we could even clean this up, quote unquote, some, and send something back out to this group at some point soon and say, does this help? Does this clear it up? And we can definitely do that.
Yeah, one of the things that Tim, Dodd, and I pushed for right after Sam was promoted to chief was a new, actually I think it was when John Collins was still here, was a new H code that if we went out on a call for homelessness, that we started tracking the calls that are related to homelessness. I don't think we have, the stuff for mental health maybe or addiction.
No.
Those aren't, but that's the type of thing that, we're striking a balance here between how much onus do we put on the police department for record keeping and tracking, so that, we can report back and feel confident that, we are spending this exactly as the voters intended. And kind of what you saw, which I think are, I think y'all, I know, looked at calls for service.
Oh, yeah.
When you did this analysis, but there could be a level of specificity that would probably be helpful, particularly if there's some sort of challenge to this. The other thing that I'll mention, and I'll send the committee all of the news articles and stories, some videos that were done pre-election. One of them was a city video after the election, where we made it perfectly clear before the election. And I was the chief spokesperson, right, for this alternative policing tax, so I own it. And so I have a little bit of, I don't want to say defensiveness, but I just want to make sure everyone hears the words coming out of my mouth in these pre-election videos. This is to fund existing alternate police programs. And then when this came up, we had a resident who's pretty frequent critic, who made me put in writing, and I wrote a very long essay on exactly how this is how we're going to spend this money. It is for all existing programs. The benefit will be when we actually get more money than what is, that can only go towards new alternate policing programs or expansion of those programs. But in all of our pre-election materials, we said this is to fund existing programs because we have diverted so much money from traditional policing in the last 5 years to alternate policing that we are asking the voters to backfill by giving us this tax that can go to alternate policing. So I just want to put that out there, that I'm going to send you the information so you can see it. I've asked Nathan Hoag, he did kind of just a personal video, YouTube video, and he actually stopped the video and said, you can't say that. Isn't this for new programs? I said, no, and I will never say it's for new programs. We are funding existing programs to backfill, and he restarted the video. We recorded it again. He put it out to his followers, and yeah, so we were very clear from the beginning. This was always to fund existing alternate policing programs.
Well, one of my questions which I didn't ask was, what is the total cost increase of running our police department within the last decade, for instance?
Decade?
Good question.
A decade. So I'm just saying, it could be any period of time,
I mean,
but, and I don't need an answer, but it would be interesting, and maybe there's somewhere I can look to understand that, from a budgetary standpoint. Now, that opens a whole new can of.
it depends on the new programs, it depends on so many things. I understand
Sure,
where you're coming from.
inflation, all the other things that we're going through within sort of the normal scope of
Sure.
policing and other things. So I would love to look at that, or see something where I can find that resource just to have some comparative measure.
I would not have it. Our folks on the other side of the room might have that. But if it's something we can look at and see what programs are new in the last 10 years, what programs are, existing, what did we spend more money? I've got the institutional knowledge to help with that if we need to.
Yeah, we can definitely put the numbers together. We can also give you an FTE count compared to maybe 10 years ago. That was a very good one.
Do I need
And
to send
then
an email?
Vance can fill in some of the details about new programs and things of that nature.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
If I can, I don't know if it's a response, but what Manager Lewis was saying, I need that reminder that it's supporting existing programs. So thank you. But I think what would put my mind at ease a little bit is describing the backfill. Just one slide explaining how the backfill is supporting traditional policing.
The backfill is very easy. We increased our numbers from 78 to 84 with that backfill.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that's exactly what that money went
I feel like
for.
that's a natural outcome among some other things.
Yes.
Which I don't believe, well, there are very few in the community that would disagree with that.
So, but we could definitely add that, and say what that other money is now being used for sure.
I think this probably is a good, because I think the good thing about this conversation is, because it is all in the first year, and, obviously the committee members don't stay the same every year. So the more we can kind of talk through this, the easier it is. So hopefully you're not answering the same question year after, all the same questions year after year. So I think this is good for that, and to make sure that we're supporting you all and, what the ask is as well, so.
So Manager Lewis, I guess I would have a question for you, and I'm looking at the slide with the actual language of the ballot questions. And I'm gonna switch over to the Public Works one. And it says to fund, repaving, repairing, maintaining, and improving city streets and roads is the full description. So is it possible then that at some future point, that would not actually represent additional spending, but backfill a gap in budget? Because the word additional is not in there, nor is it in, and to your point, you spoke to, being the spokesperson on the police ballot initiative, there isn't anything there about additional. But now I'm looking at the public service or public works one, and it doesn't say additional, yet that's clearly how it's been presented. So I'm just curious, could that actually at some future point not represent additional spending if the city was in a fiscal position where it wasn't able to do both and?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, I think based on the look on Tim Host's face, when I said this during a budget meeting, I want this to be additive until we catch up, I think there was a little surprise, because I think you all thought, oh, this is supplanting what we've been putting in over the last few years. I think that's a fine way to go. It's consistent with the ballot measure, and we're still doing, paving roads, repaving, et cetera. But I think until we catch up, because what we also told, there's a lot of case law on what you told the voters prior to the election. We told the voters we wanted to catch up on road maintenance. So I think until we've caught up and gotten into the 70s or so of, our street, we need to be additive. But at that point, if there's a way for us to, get down, and maybe the sales tax has grown by then maybe that is our dedicated funding source that we can, use moving forward, which frees up money for police and for parks and for all the other things that we can do. So, the language was pretty flexible, I think by design, and I want it to be additive until we've caught up, with what we said, because that's what we told voters we wanted to do, was get above 59.
And to be clear, I'm a voracious supporter of infrastructure projects and think Colorado is way behind the mark compared to many of our neighboring states, for instance. And so I like and fully support the additive nature of that. So I'm not promoting the idea that it not be, to be clear.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
And to that point, I think you had mentioned much of that during our April meeting. But I think my concern is more just in giving the public the information they need to feel reasonably confident that it's dedicated as opposed to additive.
Yeah. Which is what you're making the case there for, give us a little more detail about these percentages. Am I reading it right? Yeah. Which I think we can and will do.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else before we talk about next order of business? All right, thank you. We both appreciate that. This was helpful. I know,
Absolutely.
know it's new and that in finance, and thank you all as we're talking through this. Have lots of questions. Okay, so our next topic is the annual report. So the annual report is will be presented at council on the 5th. So it's usually due a week before that, roughly. So we were talking about this tonight because obviously our July meeting, we're not gonna be able to finalize and do everything, and that would give us a week. So we need to start working on our final report between now and July. So what I was hoping to do tonight is to talk through what we think our topic should be and then the assignment of that. And then for those that haven't, been part of this in the past, usually what we do is we just put out a Google, a shared Google Doc. We have our sections assignment. Sometimes it's one person doing it. Sometimes it can be two people, right? Okay, up to two people can talk. If it's more than that, then we can't do that. So, but Peter and I can work on a section and that'd be fine. So we need to do that. And then we can just kind of continue to work through that over the next month, and then I think we can wrap up anything in July and hopefully be ready to submit it. So to that, I went through notes over the past year and had some ideas of potential topics. But I also wanted, before I start, chiming in, does anybody have any ideas that they would like to, propose out there, or that they would like to work on, and we can kind of talk through that. If not, then I'll go through my ideas and folks can chime in.
Well, and Bill, if I can add real quick,
Yeah.
just last year we did an introduction.
Yeah.
We did
Yeah.
funding, debt and alternatives.
Yep, that's good.
We did expanded and improved partnerships. We did employer of choice, which was a hot topic. We had a recognition section and then we did a conclusion.
Yep, no, thanks, that's good to bring up, so we remember what we talked about last year. And yeah, to Peter's point, we'll, have somebody do their own conclusion. Somebody usually proofs it, which is always nice, just kind of that quick sanity check before we finalize. We finalize it basically, once we're all good with it, then we send a official kind of memo to Jenny, and she takes it from there to everybody to get it added to the agenda. And then, yeah, we always do like a recognition kudos as well. So some of the thought, I thought, I mean, segue, I don't know if there's anything specific we want to talk about this year from the sales and use tax and our efforts there. I think the first year we went through SIP, I think we did talk about it a little bit as part of the annual report. I think it was more just kind of acknowledgement than it was anything specific. I mean, I think we have our details in this meeting. I don't think we need to necessarily rehash all that with council, other than saying maybe, hey, we requested additional details or clarifications, but that is a potential topic. Other areas I saw were, and the stuff that we had talked about was, this came up during SIP was, I think we had all reached a point where we understood more, I think, of the importance or felt it was important to continue to make sure we're funding the right things with the city center, because I think it was, a good point of clarification this year that, hey, still moving forward in a direction of a vision, but there's no timeline on that. And I think that was a lot clearer this year. So we, even as we were going through SIP, we said, hey, the carpet and some furniture and stuff like that. I mean, I think overall our thought was hey, we still wanted this to be, and I think we put this in our memo, was a welcoming and place for, the staff and the community. So that could be a topic there as well, that we just feel that that's still important. Obviously, you gotta weigh what you want to do long-term, as far as any bigger or long-term improvements. Technology was a big one. I know early on, and I think Joe and Eisenhardt brought this up, was just ensuring that IT is brought into discussions. Not to say that they're not happening, but just the importance of making sure IT knows what's going on. And then, and as the department has a new system or technology that they want to introduce, and making sure that they're part of that discussion. And I think that's probably, to me, even heightened a bit more, assuming those network improvements that were on the budget, continue to move forward. Because I'm sure that changes things. There's security in there, so there's just kind of a general importance there. I think, Peter, you had brought this up or highlighted it was during the SIP was the traffic calming. There was just, I think we were at a point, again, we put this in the memo, but I think there was general, confusion or just not, it's like there was traffic calming work we're doing here. There's a master traffic plan. How does that all really come together? Why is it not together? So that could be an area where we write about as well. The reserve policy, I know that brought up. I don't remember, Ward, you talked about that with us a bit, and I think one of the questions I had highlighted from that was, is the reserve enough, and when do we draw from the reserve, and any feedback or input we have on that to council could be helpful. And then,
Thank you, Peter.
just kind of other topics that water and sewer, I don't know if there was anything in particular that came out of those presentations,
Which ones?
like for the water and sewer, and I think we're always usually pretty in agreement and just like the direction, so I don't know if there's anything to really add to that from a recommendation perspective, maybe kudos, recognition, but the Parks and Rec bond, I don't know at this point, because I didn't listen yesterday, so I don't know what happened. But I don't know if it's like kind of too late to really say anything, if there's any value there.
I was gonna bring that up because I wasn't listening either, so I'm assuming it was discussed last night. So where are we at with the parks bond?
We still got a couple weeks. I mean,
Okay, it's still being,
well, they're gonna come back with some final
Okay.
things, I think, staff is going to from some of the discussion.
how does that
Probably
align
should
with the
listen
August 5 presentation?
That's probably August 5th. Well, I don't know. Sean, when are they?
I think August 11th is second reading. Did I dream that? Do we have a meeting on August 11th?
It'd be the 12th.
12th, I think the second reading is August 1. But essentially, they were just under 40 million with including all the project that council wanted, and could get 4 votes basically for, or 4 indications of support. And so the question that was, one of the big questions is whether to add a swimming pool, an outdoor swimming pool, in lieu of the splash pad at Miller Field, and council wants some more analysis of that. So we're bringing that analysis back, as well as kind of the rest of the package with everything kind of buttoned up. Anybody want to give a different
Well, and
interpretation?
I thought it was around 42 to 43 million, I think, with this.
Oh, with the swimming pool? Okay.
But I don't remember the day that staff was gonna bring back information. Do you remember, Steve?
Next council session, which isn't until I think the 14th of July or something like that. 17th, 15th,
Because I was gonna propose that we incorporate
17th.
the Parks Bond
Yeah.
into our report. But if the timing
Yeah.
doesn't allow us to do
That's where I
so
was
or
at.
makes it moot, then we might want to communicate to council.
Sounds like
By
we'll
we, I
make
mean
it.
you all, but
Sounds like it still might be worthwhile to,
Well, I think if you had some ideas to weigh in on, you know, financial numbers and things like that, I think there still would be time, because what is second reading is in August, right?
Right.
So,
And because we only have 5 council members on the 17th, it's gonna actually be a week later that we bring it back officially.
so the 22nd.
Yes, I think it's the 22nd, and then August. Oh, well, Tim says they are bringing pool info. The pool info will be back on July 15th for you to look at, but not necessarily the first reading. First reading will be July 22nd as currently planned.
so there, I think there would be, I mean, it'd be close, but I think there'd probably be some benefit in there.
If you have strong feelings about it, you
Yeah.
probably should make some.
We did mention it in our funding commentary last year.
Yeah, you're right, we did. And I think we were just looking at, and I think this was before it was kind of taken off the table.
It was, we were
last
just
year.
saying, you know, do you
Sources
pay
and
the
stuff like
taxpayers,
that,
or
yeah.
do you try to fund some of it in other
Yeah.
ways?
Yeah.
And there were some criticisms.
That's true.
So it would kind of make sense for us to do it.
Yeah.
From just following through on what we started.
Yep, that's a good reminder. And then, the only other, which I don't really know, but I did, if nothing else, just cared and appreciated the comment you made about the Fox and Oxford, crosswalk. I know that's something we've talked about, so I don't know if it's really, something we could bring, but maybe I'll just write an email to my council members and just say, I think, the idea of that as somebody who drives across that street a lot would be nice, but I don't know if it's really a budget thing, but was
Actually, I think those things are coming forward.
yeah.
Am I mistaken, Sean, the crosswalk at Oxford and Fox? Are we moving in that direction or we don't?
Yes,
know yet?
we're definitely moving, to finish that analysis.
we could put a bullet point in there.
We just, I mean, if anybody has, or just maybe, just hey, if people agree that it's a good idea or not, could, like you said, it could just be a miscellaneous kind of thing to throw out there, but
Because sometimes we have that final paragraph, with just little tidbits, just.
we'll just throw it in there.
Mhm.
So again, and those were kind of my notes. I'm not saying anything should or shouldn't be. I can provide my opinion, but, these were some of the topics.
So
That's
what's,
probably maybe too lengthy of a list, but
What's that second bullet point?
sales and use tax,
Oh, sure.
city center IT security / technology reserve policy, park bond. And then this is maybe a bullet down here. I don't think that's a full topic.
I like reserve policy because I feel like that's something
Yeah,
that
that's a good
always requires attention. It
Yeah.
should always be on the radar.
Were there any others?
and anyone who feels interest in taking on or working with somebody on, I will say Suzanne she'll be gone.
I will
So,
plan to attend the meeting on the 5th. I
but I
Do
don't.
not, I will not be sad about not having to write.
Yeah.
So how many topics should we take? 3 or 4?
I would say so.
Okay, so can we vote maybe?
I mean, does anyone else have any thoughts or like something that they feel strongly should be in there?
Just getting a better view.
Sorry, my handwriting's, I didn't, it's not very good, I just did it for the sake of having a tab.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Capital improvement, budget, sales and use tax, city center, IT, technology, security, reserve policy, parks bond. I mean, I heard one vote for parks bond, so I'm just gonna put that right there. I'm gonna vote for it.
Reserve policy,
Okay.
at least I know I agree with what Suzanne
Oh,
said.
no, you were, that's the one, that's,
Yeah.
I'm a parks bond.
okay, so that's me and you.
You can put me in parentheses.
And then we have 3 for here.
I think this.
You don't want to just be in line.
Well, I mean, I want to be in line, but in about 15 minutes, it doesn't matter anymore, so.
Well, you still have to participate.
I do.
I think the sales and use tax is very important since we're actually charged with reviewing that. And there probably needs to
I
be some record of that in addition to the minutes.
100%.
In an unofficial capacity, I think sales and use tax and reserve policy are my areas of interest.
Great.
For the reason that you mentioned and for the reason as far as the reserve policy, it seemed like when we were discussing that, it seems like there's a lot of maybe room for questions or undefined processes around that bear relevance to this, to our roles.
And if you have, and I don't know if you've gone back and read any previous kind of readouts, but you know, if
I
you
only
have
read
thoughts of
last
like,
year's.
you know, but if you have thoughts of like what those should be, I mean, those are the types of things we can include and send to council, not just to say, hey, we think it should, but if we have suggestions, we can, you know, certainly, it's welcomed.
The only one I've read so far, and I between this and the next meeting, I think that will likely change, but the only one I've read so far is from last year.
I'm kind of on the fence on whether city center or IT, you know, not that we couldn't do both.
I mean, you know, I hear every day of cyber breaches.
You know,
And, you know, I mean, we have also some IT needs.
Yeah.
Although maybe that goes up under here.
yeah, some of
Because
that.
to me, we almost have to talk about this.
Are there any topics that the present council members would be intrigued?
So it's interesting, last night at the budget, the CIP discussion or the enhancements discussion, IT presented some things, a bunch of things. You might look at that. Because there are a lot of things that needed.
Yeah, Jenny, could we send the committee the list of enhancement requests?
Okay. That's good feedback.
No, that is a good question, because we've asked them in the past, and sometimes it's nice to have some direction as to what they want to hear and need to hear.
So do we want to add in your traffic? I mean, I agree with traffic too. I think it's a good topic because I think we were all,
Well, maybe we put this down here with the crosswalk and walkability and maybe we just do
maybe that.
a whole traffic section, since it is quite the topic right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would give us four areas. Four areas and then, you know, plus kudo or recognition and drug inclusion and stuff like that. All right. So, okay. Does anyone disagree with those topics? Okay.
Are we gonna cut city center?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. So capital enhancements budget, which will include technology in that. Right? Is that what we agreed to? Or are we gonna do this one separately?
I think it could be separate. I mean, I don't think it has to be. I think SIP is just, that's just where it came up. You know, and we could reference that. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to that. I think it was just, hey, it's part of the SIP, process. This was a point of, I don't know,
So can we do all these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
C4. Well, I have reserve policies,
Okay.
sales and use tax, the IT stuff, and then a traffic section. And then we have, recognition and stuff. Is that,
Did you say
Wow.
park ban? Park
Yeah, park
oh, I
bond.
forgot, that's the one I forgot.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, you're right, thank you, good catch.
so this is more, the enhancements, capital improvements budget is a separate one, or we put that in?
No,
intro?
I just was saying, it just came up as part of that discussion, not that it's necessarily a section.
Okay.
When we were talking about it, that's, the point, that was all during that meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're kind of obligated to discuss it or write about it to some level, right?
So yeah, so that, that gives us 5, so that's quite a
Okay.
bit.
Are we good?
Um,
All right. Take this down.
So you had mentioned you wanted to be involved on reserve policy and sales and use tax, right?
Just that those are the two that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, no,
Happy
that's-
to be
that's
involved,
great.
However.
And I think that's great. And does anybody want to work with him on that to support, or do you want any help with that? Are you good?
Any help would be appreciated, but
And part of having the Google, anybody could kind of chime in. Like I said, you just got to work in groups of 2. So it's not that anybody can't chime in on anything. I think a lot of times we added comments and stuff too, like, hey, that bill, I don't understand this or stuff like that. So that can also be there. Traffic. Any takers?
I would do that one.
Okay. So then there's IT network. I don't mind doing that one. If somebody else would prefer, that's fine too, or I can work with somebody on it, doesn't matter to me. Parts bond.
And you can always assign things to Jay.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
James, you want to work on the parks
Yeah.
bond with me?
And I think Peter and I talked about pairing up again. That was a lot of fun last year.
Yeah, and I did
Co-op
some of the
and
work,
stuff.
the preemptive work on that one too, so with you last year.
Yeah.
so.
Maybe we'll give
Okay.
Jay intro and conclusion. And then he can just chime in wherever else he wants, which is, I think we've done that before with,
I think I updated the intro last year.
yeah,
I'm happy to do that again.
okay,
I can
Okay.
help with that too.
Yeah.
okay. I can put James, I can do it, I'll put conclusion, so I'll put conclusion as Jay and proof, and then he can chime in wherever else. So I can get a Google Doc out there, I'll do that shortly. And then I'll share it out if you can't access it. Or I'll share it out to Jenny, and then she'll send it out to everybody. And then I think just plan to have your sections ready by the 23rd. And then we'll finalize, if there's any things, hey, we just don't agree or want clarifications, just put that in add a comment, and that's what we'll talk about, and we'll just kind of finalize it. And then, we'll get it to Jenny about a week before the 5th, whatever date that would be. Does that sound good? Am I missing anything?
I don't think so.
All right. Okay, so that's our main agenda, and we're almost done here. I know it's 6:37. Next meeting, July 23rd. So I'll go into members' choice. I had a couple items. Anybody have anything?
Actually,
Yeah.
Bill, I had a question on the schedule, and I brought this up before, and you guys can shoot me down one more time. But we have a working session on August 27th dedicated to scheduling for the upcoming year. And I'm wondering, could we not do that during our July meeting? And I know there'll be a new chair, But it just seems to me that by the time we get to spring, every year we're needing a supplemental meeting somewhere along the way. And that seems to be one of our lighter meetings, is that August meeting when we kind of schedule our year ahead. And I'm just wondering if we can't move that into July along with the election of the chair and the vice chair.
I don't have any issue with that, because I agree. I think if everybody's doing their stuff, we should be pretty well aligned. I think on the last couple of years, we have been on the presentation to council. The only thought I would have is, I think that's sometimes been a dedicated meeting because we're not yet at the point where anybody else can come in and start presenting yet. So that's kind of why it's been a working session, because we're not ready for the other departments to come in yet. And I think, Tim and Tyson and everybody work with everybody to get that scheduled together. So I don't know what else we would talk about in August, August 27th. That's my only thought, but otherwise, I would think we would have time. Worst case, we don't, we just don't get to it,
I was gonna say another option you might consider, because Finalize annual report on July 23rd could take up a chunk of your meeting. You guys might consider just drafting your schedule outside of a meeting. Somebody create one, Jenny create one, and then pass it around virtually for you guys to agree on or offer suggestions.
Yeah, we should certainly provide our input in to it if folks want to create a separate Google Doc for that. Like I said, I just don't know what our topic would be in August.
So I guess, could we ask the staff that are around the table, would it be possible for a department to be able to present in August as the first kind of kickoff versus September?
If we're looking at 2024, you'll have a partial year. I mean, it could happen, but we could possibly have like the municipal court present. Just trying to think who else would be good. Because I think we'd want at least two departments. Or do you think just one?
Didn't we have courts with, was it the clerk's office this last time?
Wasn't it PD?
And I thought it was the clerks, because they were talking about taking passport applications and things like that.
Yeah, I think the answer is we absolutely
Good.
can, but it will definitely be early.
It'll be very early, and just so that you know that we're not through 2024 yet. We'll be at least halfway through the year. So.
Maybe do we just keep August as a working session then? Quick working session,
Or maybe it should just be remote or something like that. It seems like a pretty light agenda to all convene for physically. That's just my opinion, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could think of something else to talk about during that time. I agree. I don't think it'll take a full meeting to get through that. Maybe over the next few weeks, we can think of if there's any other topics to include there.
We can definitely put together a potential or tentative working session for next month.
Yeah, that we could.
That you guys can then finalize and then.
Yeah, and then go from there.
But I'd like to get the departments that you'd like to see in August, a little bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
A little bit of lead time, because it's kind of a busy time of budget right now.
Yeah, because you're within budget, yeah. Yeah, I don't think we want to add any additional pressure or scheduling challenges to staff.
And then, are there any changes to the template, the presentation template that you all would like to incorporate? That would also be helpful during that August meeting, if you'd like us to refresh that in any way.
Maybe we can add that as a topic just so we don't forget. That's a good point. Well, maybe we talk about it again in July. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether to say to go and create a schedule yet or not, I guess is kind of where I'm at. It feels like it's premature. But I mean, I say that and I agree with you too, you know what I mean? But I guess if I were to say it's, chairperson, it seems like it's probably premature to ask anybody to come in yet. Okay, any other topics? Okay, so for members' choice, first I just want to say thank you to Suzanne. I know this is your last meeting. I feel like we should be like having champagne or giving her a bottle of something or something like that. But thank you. I think it's been 8 years, so.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
It's been a great
Years I've been here that keep us moving forward and have the context. So thank you and focused. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I haven't been here for very long, but you've certainly carried more than your weight.
And then I guess with that, we have, Jenny told me today, we have somebody joining us next week or next month, Laura Cooper, who will be our new alternate member. And then I would just say, think about who wants to be chair, vice chair, because that's obviously part of our July meeting. I'm termed out, so somebody's got to take it over.
Lucky duck.
No pressure.
And if you don't want to be it, you better
Yeah,
show up at the meeting, right?
Yeah.
Laura, the Citizen of the Year?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Any other member choice items? All right. Thank you, everybody. Great.
Good conversation.
Sorry for the room.
Made it all the way.
Thank you.